With all of the recent news that American Horror Story is going to get a new season featuring Kim Kardashian, I decided to finally break my silence and talk about one of the worst seasons of American Horror Story I've ever watched, and that most definitely has to be American Horror Story Apocalypse. So if you're interested in me talking about how I feel like American Horror Story Apocalypse was awful, keep on watching. Hi guys, welcome back to Ella Pastoro. If this is your first time ever coming upon this channel right here, typically I talk about all of my favorite pieces of media as well as talking about fandom culture, but you've actually stumbled upon my Ella Enchanted series where I'm talking about all of my favorite spooky things, and today we're talking about why I feel like American Horror Story Apocalypse was god awful. So before we can really talk about why I feel like it was awful, we need to be on the same page on what American Horror Story Apocalypse was.
I just wanted to take a quick break from the regularly scheduled content to thank all of my Patreons who are currently subscribed to my Patreon. Special thanks to all of my current Patreons. Thank you, Alex, Harry on a Hook, Blythe, Danny, Tammy, Charlie, Malika, for all your support. Without y'all, I wouldn't be able to do this. If you want to be included in my Patreon shout out, please make sure to subscribe to my Patreon. We have a lot of fun things to offer over there. And now let's get back to the regularly scheduled content.
So American Horror Story Apocalypse is the 8th season of the anthology show known as American Horror Story. Each season of American Horror Story is supposed to be separate and have its own spooky concept. So for the first season, it involved a murder house. The second season, I believe, involved an asylum. And I believe the third season, which in my personal opinion was the best season, involved a coven. And so American Horror Story Apocalypse is the spin-off of the Coven season. And even though so many fans were excited for this, American Horror Story Apocalypse left much to be desired. From now on, I'm just going to be referring to American Horror Story Apocalypse as Apocalypse, just so I can flow better in this video. But Apocalypse was widely considered to be one of the worst seasons yet, despite the return of many of our favorite beloved characters from the Coven season. And even though it promised us a once-in-a-lifetime crossover event that we've literally never gotten before in an American Horror Story season, it left much to be desired. The show started off with a really strong premise, but still, it ultimately failed to live up to many of our expectations. The reason why I feel so disappointed specifically by this season of American Horror Story is that there was so much potential for this season to be great, but I really feel like its reliance on fan service and not building an actual good standalone season is where we lost the plot. So what happened in American Horror Story is that there was a gigantic nuclear apocalypse that wiped out most of humanity. A group of survivors are hauled up in an underground bunker ran by a mysterious organization known as the Cooperative. However, as the season progressed, the plot became overly complicated with time travel, alternate dimensions, and a confusing mythology that left many viewers scratching their head. And this is where I stand by my points that their inclusion of too much fan service left us not having a good standalone season. And like I said before, Apocalypse is literally a follow-up of some of the other seasons of American Horror Story, specifically Murder House as well as Coven. So if you guys had watched Coven, you know that because of a lot of the nonsense that happened in season 1, there was a child that was unconsensually conceived between a ghost and a human woman. This child had a twin brother. He's not important, no one cares about him. But Michael Landon was that child. Due to the fact that he was conceived by both a human and a ghost, he is like the Antichrist or whatever. Supposedly, we learned in this season that the ghost was Satan. Who knows? Who knows? Due to the fact that he is an abomination practically, he is raised by his grandmother, Jessica Landon, I believe. But he's a weirdo. He keeps killing people because he's the Antichrist. He's a weirdo. Eventually, he runs away from home. He meets a Satanist who lets him know that he matches up all of the key signs of being the Antichrist. And now he finally has purpose in his life, because before he just felt like, why am I so weird? Why does no one love me? He also was 5 years old and one day ages up to be a grown man. So he has a lot of teenager, he has a lot of angst because he's like, no one loves me. I'm a weirdo. He's the Antichrist. I mean, what can he expect? And so he eventually gets to realize that he is the Antichrist. Due to the fact that he feels like he's the big honcho now, he decides that he's going to fight against the witches and practically rule the world. And that plot I liked. The section of the plot where Michael Landon is trying to take over the witches due to sexism and the fact that he is passing all of the supreme tests was peak. I love that part of the season so much. Like him using his charisma, him winning everyone over, him fighting with the witches, him literally having the powers of the Supreme, but because of the fact that he's the Antichrist, he literally is winning them over, you know. If you guys watched Apocalypse, you know what I'm talking about. That section of Apocalypse was so good. But where they lost me is the whole after the Apocalypse stuff. After Michael Landon takes over, this is where things start to not make sense. And this is where things start to get super convoluted for me. Um, Due to the fact that he is the Antichrist, he passes the Supreme test, and all of the actual witches are mad because they've never had a male Supreme. That's like an abomination. Witches are female driven, like, you guys know how witches are. Like, it's been witches. Witches are the top girls. Like, it's a female dominated space. And for Michael Landon to come over and take it over, they didn't like that. And this is where they do this super highly over complicated scheme that involves time travel, multiple dimensions. And I just felt like it was bad. And I also don't understand Michael Landon's point of view in things after a while. So he gets his big wish, he takes over the world and destroys it, right? I get that. He's the Antichrist. The main thing that comes to the Antichrist is the destruction of the world as we know it. He got that. For some reason, I do know the reason. There are survivors. These survivors are supposed to be people who helped Michael Landon in his nuclear apocalypse. The big honchos or whatever, right? People who were a part of the Illuminati, who secretly worship Satan, and were like, whatever you want, master, will do. For some reason, Michael Landon is going out of his way to pretend that he isn't the big final bad guy and is torturing these people. And the way he's torturing these people isn't even good torture either. Like, I understand maybe keeping a couple humans to torture because, like, you're the Antichrist, like, you're the big bad, right? But he does things in a way that's supposed to be funny, but it's funny bad and not funny in a good torture way either. So everybody who was in the bunker had the belief that because they served Satan, they were going to get to live out the end of days as kings and queens. And they're kind of given that treatment, but at the end of the day, they're still being treated like the scum of the earth. And one of the characters, there's two gay characters, right? I'll put a picture of them on the screen. They take one of the gay characters and cut him up and make him into something for the people to eat because they're supposedly running out of food or whatever, right? And there is just this iconic line, if you want to call it that, from Apocalypse where they're like, they made stew into stew! Ah! And it was just whack. Like, the scenes that involved the after apocalypse parts were the worst part of the show for me. I loved Cody Fern playing Michael Landon because that boy can act his butt off, but literally everything else was sucky. We have these two characters. We don't know why they got into the bunker because they don't have any special. They don't have anything special about them, and their characters were so dry. We later find out that they have enough special genetic markers to make the Antichrist, but I promise we'll get into that later when I talk about how everything else was just awful. This season, unlike other seasons in American Horror Story, really lacked character development. Many of the characters felt very one-dimensional and underdeveloped for me. Even the return of some of our favorite characters and actresses and actors from previous seasons, such as Sarah Paulson's Cordelia and Evan Peters' Tate, felt like shadows of their former self. This lack of character development made it very difficult for viewers to connect with the characters and invest in their storylines. Like, there was a bunch of fan service moments, but due to the fact that I really feel like the writers did not know what to do with balancing backstory and also adding to the story, it felt so... it left so much to be desired. Sarah Paulson aged. She was playing several characters this season. She was putting her toes into her performances. But overall, the plot to defeat the big bad guy of the season, the Antichrist, was whack. Let me just get to the point when I'm talking about this. So I told you guys, Cody Fern's character Michael Landon, he won, right? That's how we got the apocalypse. But the witches are dissatisfied with that, so they ended their lives and waited for the apocalypse so they can enact their final plan. Their final plan was to get together, summon all of the dead witches, and destroy Michael Landon. Michael Landon is way too powerful for them. So they're like, you know what? We gotta go back in time. We gotta go back in time before he was so powerful, right? And when they do this, they go back through time and they accidentally go too far back in time, or they do a trial run or whatever, where they go and see Princess Anastasia. We find out that in the greater American Horror Story lore that Princess Anastasia was a witch, and when her family was being unalived, she tried one final spell to try to save them, but due to the fact that she was so weak, she couldn't save them. I felt like that was so unnecessary and low-key disrespectful. I felt like that was so unnecessary and that shouldn't have been included. But due to the fact that like the Supreme or whatever, the Supreme that they were able to choose, because Michael Landon was supposed to be the Supreme, but obviously he's not even a witch, he's the Antichrist. They choose like Claudelia, I believe, to be the Supreme. She passed that test of going back in time to see Princess Anastasia fail to save her family, which I felt like was really insensitive, but I digress. Due to the fact that she passed this test, she's able to travel back in time while Michael Landon is still a kid and hits him with a car, or causes him to be hit with a car. And that's how we destroy our big bad of the season, and that was whack. Michael Landon, he was a really good villain. I really enjoyed Cody Fern's portrayal of Michael Landon, and I felt like the way they took him out in the end was whack. Like, this is a supernatural show, and y'all hit him with a car. Y'all couldn't have done a little magic here, magic there. And they also introduced a lot of religious elements in the show, which I liked. For example, if we're going to be talking about the Antichrist, we're obviously going to have to talk about who? Christ. You know, so there was some angel symbolism, but they didn't do anything with that, which I felt like was such a letdown, because if we're going to talk about the Antichrist, you have to involve Christ. But they did some angel symbolism and said, that's enough for y'all, and didn't let that develop. That would have been way better than whatever nonsense they did of letting Michael Landon be hit with a car. Maybe we have some angels teaming up with the witches, betraying their holy code or whatever, to get rid of Michael Landon because he's too powerful. I would have preferred that than what we got. And how the actual season ended was those two boring people that I talked about in the beginning. We find out that they have some DNA that is suitable for hosting the Antichrist, and a new Antichrist is born via them. And I felt like that was such a cop-out, because that practically told us that, oh, no matter what the witches do, there's always going to be an apocalypse. And I wouldn't have minded that ending if it wasn't such a boring ending. Those two people who birthed the Antichrist were regular civilians. For Michael Landon, his conception was literally an abomination. He was a product of SA practically. It was SA, between a human and a ghost. That is literally a supernatural catastrophe, right? These two regular people were able to birth the Antichrist because what? They had special DNA. It's not like it's hinted that they're magical creatures and their great ancestors were witches or something special. They're literally regular people who did a DNA test, and their importance in the show was overplayed for me. Like, it really felt like a cop-out to me. And in addition to the fact that this season suffered from poor spacing, it also suffered from tonal inconsistencies. The first few episodes were slow and plodding, with the fact that they were in the bunker after the apocalypse, while the latter half of the season was rushed and extremely disjointed. I talked about the alternate timelines as well as the time traveling. This season was a mess. This season tried to balance horror with comedy, but the jokes often felt extremely flat and undercut the tension and the horror elements that many people love about American Horror Story. And this is such a disappointment to me, because I watch American Horror Story to be scared. Like, all of the scenes with Michael Landon while he was fighting the witches and trying to pretend to be their supreme was really interesting. It was all of the politics of it, all of the manipulation, all of the fact that Michael had to be so conniving and manipulating. That generally scared me. But him in the bunker pretending to not be himself, him lying that he is just a part of the cooperative when he literally is the head of the cooperative, it was a cop-out to me. And I watch American Horror Story to be scared, not to be like confused, you know? And even though I was really glad to see some of my favorite characters from previous seasons show up, the fact that I feel like they focused more on including them than building a good story was devastating. Like, it was so nice to see this character and that character, but the fact that they really couldn't focus on Apocalypse and how it would be to have the end of the world, because this season has so much potential. And overall, I really feel like this is why we didn't get another crossover season, because they I felt like they felt too overwhelmed trying to balance three unique concepts and making a continuation of their story. I feel like American Horror Story is just better as an anthology. They kill it when it comes to individual seasons and concepts, but making a follow up, I feel like it stressed them out. And overall, because of this, and I feel like the later seasons that came after American Horror Story, I just stopped watching the show. I just stopped watching the show. I really felt like Apocalypse was the beginning of the end for the quality in terms of American Horror Story, but I don't know. That's just my own personal opinion. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you actually like this season of American Horror Story and I'm just being a hater. I really want to talk to someone about this because I talked to my best friend, Gabby, if you're watching, hi, about this, and she was just like, I knew it was going to be trash. I knew it was going to be trash. It looked trashy. But this had so much potential. And if you guys had watched my Rendell and Wild video, you know I hate wasted potential. Like, if something's bad because it's bad, I'm like, okay, there's nothing to miss and there's nothing to be regretful about. But the fact that this season has so much potential and then it ended up sucking, it really hurt my feelings. But if you enjoyed this video, make sure that you hit the thumbs up button and share this video with your friends. It really helps out this channel. Make sure that you leave a comment so we can have a good discussion in the comment section. Subscribe because I still have more episodes of Ella Enchanted coming out for you guys this year. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!